News Radio 700 WLW.
In my mind, the most important thing, I don't care who's governor, who's this, that, mayor, or whatever the case might be. I'm worried about my savings and my retirement plan, my 401k in the long term.
Well, I think those are all fine. It's just the cost of everyday goods. I mean, you look at the stock market and 401k is growing leaps and bounds. But yeah, and that is the big problem right now, to be honest, for the Republicans and Trump is the cost of things. Now, inflation which was at 21.5% under Biden. Gasoline rose to like 31%. So he's brought inflation down, but still the cost of things is still high for the average American. So their problem, the Trump administration must get this under control by the midterms next year, or it ain't going to be pretty. But it's got to be, how can we bring the price of things down? I don't know how you do it. Maybe our next guest knows.
Well, yeah, he can speak to this. He is Steve Cotton. Steve, how you doing, buddy?
Well, good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm doing great.
Good. So Steve, I guess kind of what I had said there. I think inflation has settled back down, and of course Trump, he campaigned on this, and he succeeded in bringing gas price. I mean, to me, that's the number one thing you do if you want to bring the price of things down, which is decrease the amount it costs to transport things from A to B. He was able to, kind of get gas prices back under control. They're under $3 a gallon right now. So that has helped. But in terms of actually bringing just the actual cost of items down, what can be done here?
Well, you're exactly right. When you lower the price of energy, petroleum products are used in so much of what we manufacture every day. They're almost in everything. And the greatest anti-inflation measure you can take is to lower the cost of energy. And the Trump administration has worked to try to do that very diligently. And he's mainly doing that through growing production. That's how we did it before. But there are some elements of inflation that are more complicated. Take housing, for example. Housing is largely a market-specific dynamic, and it's a dynamic that's sort of driven by supply and demand, and it's also impacted by long-term mortgage interest rates, and not something the administration can necessarily exert a lot of control over. That's a very local, real estate-oriented kind of thing. It was said for a long time that the tariffs are going to inevitably have to be inflationary, but they haven't been so far for the most part. So I think there are some areas where the administration can continue to take anti-inflation actions, and there are other areas that they're not going to have any influence over at all.
Steve Kahn's our guest, and Steve, you brought up the tariffs, and now it's before the Supreme Court. What do you see happening here? Because there is, obviously, that's very contentious on both sides of the aisle right now.
It's a very big deal. Frankly, I think it could go either way. The president has quoted his authority under IEPA, which was a Nixon-era law that granted the president significant trade authority, especially in times of emergencies. And President Trump has defined emergency as a 40-year crisis where our trading partners have imposed huge tariffs on our goods and huge non-tariff barriers to our market entry in their markets. Been a grossly unfair system for 40 years. President Trump is he's justifying his action on tariffs because of this 40-year imbalance against us in the favor of our trading partners. If the Supreme Court rules that Trump exceeded his authority granted by Congress, it will create huge chaos. And people have already started speculating, well, does this mean that the importers will get refunds if the tariffs are ruled unconstitutional?
Right.
That is going to be $100 to $200 billion mess if that happens.
Now, Steve, isn't there I was reading a 1977 court case that, pretty much says, look, the president does have the power to impose tariffs. Now, does that mean in every way, shape, or form Donald Trump's trying to do it, but it largely grants him the ability to do that, correct?
Well, that's what's being debated, because there you can read the statute one way that says that the Congress granted the president some fairly broad authority to regulate commerce, and the plaintiffs are arguing that it did not give the president specific authority to levy arbitrary tariffs. If the Supreme Court rules in the president's favor, it will reinforce his leverage in trying to bring to bear, our trading partners to a more fair trading regime. I can see the court doing that, but they have also made rulings against the executive branch and the unappointed federal or the unelected federal bureaucracy in regulatory cases. So I think it's 50-50 as to which way the court goes. But if they rule against the president, it will create tremendous chaos, and it will cut his legs out from under him in terms of the leverage he's trying to use to achieve a more fair trading regime worldwide.
See, I just don't know what else Trump really can do. I mean, Biden's presidency was such a disaster, probably the second worst president in history behind James Buchanan, right? With inflation and prices, and we're not even getting into immigration and all that, but just the economy. But again, if people are charging X for something and enough people are buying it and are paying that price, no matter how large or massive it may be, I don't know what you can do. So I think, again, the two options he has are lower gas prices, which he absolutely has done. And I think he sees tariffs as a way to be able to do something. There's no way you can impose your will on the economy. This is not, at least not yet. We're not in a socialist communist country where you can just go in and say, hey, John Q. Store owner, you are now going to charge $2 for apples instead of $6. That's not the way it works. So I at least give Trump credit for trying, right? Do I know that tariffs are going to work? No. Do I think the logic is sound? Yes. Go over to China, Japan, hell, even Europe, and count how many American-made cars you see. Count how many Fords and Chevys you see over there. You won't see any of them. And a lot of that has to do because of trade imbalances. So the logic is sound. But it's right, Steve. It's such a complex issue and very reactionary that I guess we don't really know at this point if it's going to work. And now I guess we don't know if the court's going to even allow it.
Well, I don't think anybody knows how this court is going to rule on this particular case. When you look at tariffs, I use this example. There are some tariffs that are definitely inflationary, and there are other tariffs that may not be. For example, if I go to the liquor store and I want to buy my favorite Irish whiskey, and I find out it's now $98 a barrel instead of a bottle instead of $48 a bottle, then I'll just buy good Kentucky whiskey instead. Mm-hmm. However, he put 50% tariff on copper. We only mine about 50% of our national need for copper, and we have to import the other 50%. That is not something we can fix in a short period of time. Therefore, copper is used in housing, all kinds of things. Therefore, that kind of a tariff can't help but be inflationary at some point. But so there's not one uniform economic impact to all tariff actions. It's very country specific, very commodity specific, but if the court rules against the president on this one, it's going to create a massive amount of chaos in trade policy. Our trading partners aren't going to know what to think. Our businesses aren't going to know what to think. Our importers aren't going to know what to think. And this issue of refunds is going to be a real mess. So I hope that the court will rule in the executive branch's favor, but I just don't think the road's clear yet. We had some questions from some of the justices yesterday that made some people think that the court might be leaning against supporting the president's position, but we'll see.
All right, we're talking to Steve Cotton. You're a financial strategist. You're an expert in these matters. Steve, let's shove the tariffs aside for the time being. And what we were talking about, in the famous words of James Carville with Clinton, it's the economy, stupid, and that's what's going on right now. In your mind, in the short term, what can the administration, what can government do to help the situation?
Well, this administration is trying to reduce the scope of regulatory impact. That can reduce costs. They're trying to drive down oil prices, which they are succeeding in doing. That will definitely drive down costs. But like I said, in places like real estate markets, they just don't have a lot of leverage because real estate is a local and a regional thing. In New York, Mamdani may very well try rent controls to drive down artificially the cost of housing. Well, I can tell you right now that's going to result in a scarcity of housing. And so do you want expensive housing or no housing? And we're getting ready to experiment with socialism, and it's not like we don't have global evidence of what socialistic approaches to the economy yield. They generally yield very poor, if not bad, results. So I think arbitrary government action to force down prices is almost always a failure. It always has bad consequences, has ripple effects, it has unintended consequences, and only through a free and competitive market are you going to get competitive, pricing and competitive options. So I think adherence to the free enterprise system and getting back to fundamentals as to supply and demand and those kinds of things, that's the only way you're going to drive costs down through expanded supply. And you don't do it through socialist solutions.
Steve, I'm not wishing for this, but is the only way for prices, because of where they are now and how we've gotten here, the only way for things to go back down is a recession? Again, not wishing for that, don't want that, but is that kind of the only thing that possibly may be out there to bring prices down?
Well, recessions is a result of slowed business activity. I don't see the elements of an impending economic recession. The economy is fairly stable. It's fairly positive. Corporate profits are still pretty good. Inflation is more of a market by market kind of problem. You look at the price of eggs, price of gas, it's different in different parts of the country. There are areas like New York City, for example, that have had terrible public policies for years that have resulted in high costs. And a lot of that's regulation, a lot of that's limited supply, and there's little the administration can do to affect that, but we may very well be getting ready to see in a place like New York with the very first literally communist mayor in the entire country, they may be getting ready to experiment with cost controls and things, and they're not going to like the outcome.
All right. With that, Steve, we'll let you go. People want to find out more about you. Where can they go?
Well, we have clients all over the country. Our website is cotton, COTTON, WMA.com, cottonwma.com. And we're financial strategists and money managers, and we're very cautious with our clients' money.
All right, Steve.
Great stuff, Steve.
With that, we'll let you go, buddy. Thanks so much.
Well, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on the show.